Imagine stepping into the Colosseum of Rome in the year 80 AD, not as a spectator, but as a condemned prisoner. Your wrists are chained, the sun beats down on you, the roar of 50,000 voices rises like thunder. Suddenly, iron gates creak open, and from the shadowed tunnels beneath the arena emerges not one lion, but a dozen. Ancient Roman historian Cassius Dio wrote of an event under Emperor Titus where 5,000 animals were slaughtered in a single day. To modern ears, it sounds impossible. But in Rome, this was reality. Gladiators did not always fight each other. Criminals were burned alive, torn apart by beasts, or forced into battles they could never win, all to feed the hunger of a crowd that craved blood. This is the forgotten horror of the Colosseum. Today, tourists walk through its ruins, imagining noble gladiators battling for honor. But the truth, revealed in ancient texts, archaeological evidence, and eyewitness accounts, is far darker. What you're about to discover is how Rome used its games not as entertainment, but as a weapon of power, propaganda, and terror. The Colosseum, known in antiquity as the Flavian Amphitheater, was not simply a sports arena, it was a political theater of control. Built under Emperor Vespasian and inaugurated by his son Titus in 80 AD, its purpose was clear: to awe the Roman people with spectacles that reminded them of Rome's absolute dominance. Gladiators were often slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. Their lives were worth little in the eyes of the elite. The Roman writer Seneca tells us of midday executions, where men were burned, beaten, and killed, while the audience demanded more. These were not duels of skill, but mass executions disguised as sport. Archaeological evidence confirms this brutality. In the hypogeum, the underground complex beneath the arena, remains of animal cages, lifts, and trapdoors reveal a carefully engineered system for unleashing chaos. Lions, leopards, bears, and even crocodiles were imported from across the empire. The arenas were soaked in blood, not just of beasts, but of countless humans sacrificed for spectacle. This wasn't entertainment, it was a political message. Rome controls life and death. To rebel was to end up as fodder for the crowd.
The Colosseum was not just a place of death, it was a carefully engineered system of psychological domination. Rome did not only kill its enemies, it transformed their destruction into theater. Every detail was designed to magnify humiliation and awe. One of the most infamous practices was damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. Criminals, prisoners of war, and slaves were stripped naked, forced into the arena, and released into the sand with no weapons. The iron gates would rise, and lions, leopards, or even packs of starving dogs would be unleashed. The crowd roared as the condemned were torn apart, limb by limb. Ancient poet Martial, who wrote about the games, described a chilling example. A man dressed as the mythic singer Orpheus played his lyre in the arena, only to be mauled by a bear. The message was clear: not even myth, art, or dignity could save you from Rome's wrath. But humiliation went further. Executions were staged as elaborate plays, reenacting myths and legends. Prisoners were forced to play the roles of tragic characters, Heracles, Prometheus, or Icarus, only to meet gruesome ends. One account tells of a man dressed as Icarus, lifted into the air with mechanical contraptions before being dropped to his death on the arena floor. The myth of flight became a cruel joke for a laughing crowd. The mechanics of death themselves were a spectacle. Archaeological studies of the Colosseum's hypogeum reveal trapdoors, elevators, and pulleys that could suddenly release cages of wild beasts or raise scenery that turned the arena into forests, oceans, or deserts. Prisoners might think themselves alone, only for the ground to open beneath them, releasing wolves or panthers into their midst. And then there were the gladiators themselves. Contrary to Hollywood myth, most were not volunteers seeking glory. They were slaves, condemned criminals, or prisoners of war. Their training was brutal, their survival uncertain. Even the best fighters were only as valuable as their entertainment value. If they displeased the crowd or the emperor, they could be executed on the spot. The games served a deeper purpose than mere bloodlust. They reminded Romans of the empire's supremacy. Every animal imported from Africa, every chained prisoner from Gaul or Dacia was living proof of Rome's reach. The message was etched in blood: Rome conquers the world, and the world suffers for Rome's pleasure. And yet, the Roman people loved it. The crowd was not just an audience, they were participants. They judged gladiators with a thumbs up or thumbs down. They shouted for more death, demanded more cruelty, and mocked the dying. The Colosseum was not simply an instrument of imperial terror, it was a mirror of Roman society itself.
The Colosseum was never only about games. It was a political tool, a grand stage where emperors could shape the hearts and minds of Rome's people. But the legacy it left behind was darker and far-reaching, imprinting cruelty into the very fabric of Roman society. The political consequence: bread and circuses. The philosopher Juvenal coined the phrase panem et circenses, bread and circuses. He saw how emperors like Titus, Domitian, and Trajan used the Colosseum to distract the masses. As long as the people were fed and entertained with blood, they would not rise in rebellion. But this bargain came at a cost. The Roman public learned to accept tyranny as long as the games continued. Loyalty could be bought not with justice, but with spectacle. Rome became a society pacified by cruelty. The social consequence: numbness to violence. Generations of Romans grew up with slaughter as their primary form of entertainment. A child might see hundreds of deaths before adulthood, not on the battlefield, but as weekend entertainment. Seneca, writing in disgust, observed how the midday executions desensitized people. I happened to drop in on a midday show, expecting some fun, wit, and relaxation. Instead, I found only butchery, pure and simple. The men have no defense. Their bodies are open to every blow, and every strike is fatal. The crowd demands more. When cruelty becomes a pastime, empathy erodes. Roman citizens were conditioned to see human life as disposable. The environmental consequence: a world bled dry. Rome's appetite for exotic animals drove entire species to extinction in the Mediterranean world. Lions, leopards, elephants, crocodiles, even ostriches, captured in Africa and the Middle East, shipped in chains to Rome, and butchered in the arena. The historian Pliny the Elder describes the games under Emperor Pompey, where 600 lions and 18 elephants were slaughtered. Later, under Trajan, games reportedly lasted 123 days, killing 11,000 animals and 10,000 gladiators. These numbers are staggering and catastrophic. The Colosseum was not just a graveyard of men, but of entire ecosystems. The cultural consequence: a legacy of cruelty. The games did not die when the empire fell. They left a psychological imprint. Medieval Europe would find new forms of spectacle punishment: public executions, witch burnings, torture displays, all echoing Rome's tradition of turning pain into theater. And even today, when millions flock to the Colosseum's ruins, most imagine it as a site of noble gladiators. Rarely do they picture the children torn from their parents, the slaves mauled by beasts, or the elephants collapsing under spears. Rome has successfully mythologized its cruelty, transforming horror into heritage. The personal consequence, Commodus, and the theater of death. If one emperor embodied the corruption of Rome's games, it was Commodus, the infamous ruler immortalized in popular culture. But the real Commodus was far darker than fiction. According to the historian Cassius Dio, Commodus styled himself as a gladiator, fighting in the arena not against worthy opponents, but against wounded men, amputees, and even tethered animals. He charged the treasury a fortune for every appearance, bleeding Rome's finances while reveling in mock combat. In one particularly grotesque display, Commodus ordered Rome's disabled citizens to be rounded up, dressed them as mythic creatures, and slaughtered them in the arena with a club, laughing as he pretended to be Hercules. For the Roman elite, it was an embarrassment. For the common people, it was still entertainment. This moment reveals the ultimate horror of the Colosseum. It blurred the line between justice, theater, and sadism. The emperor himself could become the chief executioner, and the crowd would cheer. The final shadow. The Colosseum's legacy was not in its architecture or engineering. It was in its lesson that power could be maintained through spectacle. By staging death as theater, Rome taught the world that cruelty could be normalized, sanitized, and even celebrated. And that is the forgotten horror. Behind every stone arch, behind every tourist photo, lies the memory of victims, criminals, slaves, prisoners, animals, children, sacrificed for applause. Their screams were real. Their blood was real. What remains today is only silence.
The conclusion, final verdict. The Colosseum is often romanticized as a marvel of Roman engineering, a place of gladiatorial bravery and heroic combat. But the truth is far more disturbing. It was a machine of death, humiliation, and political propaganda. Through mass executions, staged humiliations, and endless bloodshed, Rome maintained control not only over its enemies, but over its own people. The Colosseum was not just an amphitheater. It was an instrument of state power, a monument to fear. When we walk through its ruins today, we see stone arches and weathered walls. But what we cannot see are the countless screams that once filled the air, the forgotten victims whose suffering built Rome's glory. History, as it's told, often sanitizes these brutal realities. School books celebrate Rome's roads, laws, and architecture, but they rarely speak of the rivers of blood that sustained its empire. To understand Rome's true legacy, we must confront both the genius and the horror. Only then do we see the empire not as a golden age, but as a civilization built on violence, spectacle, and control. The outro. Call to action. The Colosseum may be Rome's most famous landmark, but its darkest truths are often ignored. What do you think? Was Rome's use of violence a necessary tool of empire, or a sign of its moral decay? If you want to uncover more of the secrets time forgot, subscribe to History Sleuth and ring the notification bell. The past is full of mysteries, and together we'll investigate them all.